My name is Victoria Brooks. On my brother's wedding day, I wasn't invited, and my subsequent decision shocked everyone. I didn't receive an invitation to my brother's wedding, so I went traveling instead. I'm sorry, darling, this event is only for the closest family, my mother said. When the wedding was canceled due to debt, the whole family started begging me, but it was too late. As a financial advisor in Nashville, I had spent years quietly helping my family with money matters. Loans for my brother's business ideas, emergency bills, even down payments when things got tight. I never complained and always came through. Yet somehow I was never the one they truly counted on when it mattered. That phone call came 2 weeks before the big day. My mother's voice was calm, almost casual, as she delivered the news. No invitation, no seat at the table. The celebration was reserved strictly for the closest family mates. And apparently, I didn't make the cut. The words hit hard, but I didn't argue or ask why. I simply listened, then hung up. Instead of dwelling on it, I opened my laptop that same evening and booked a solo flight to San Francisco for the exact weekend of the wedding. One-way ticket, nice hotel near the bay, no return date blocked in. For the first time in years, I chose myself over fixing another family crisis. I packed light, told no one the real reason, and left Nashville behind without looking back. Deep down, I knew something bigger was coming. But at that moment, all I felt was a strange sense of relief mixed with quiet resolve. If you've ever been treated like the backup plan by your own family, hit that like button and subscribe right now so you don't miss stories like this. 2 weeks before the wedding, I had already landed in San Francisco. The plane arrived on schedule and I collected my luggage before heading to the rental car counter. I signed the forms and drove the short distance to the hotel I had reserved. The check-in process took only minutes, and soon I was inside the room with my suitcase set aside. I sat on the edge of the bed and let the quiet settle around me. For the first time in years, I had created distance from every family obligation without guilt creeping in. My daily work as a financial advisor meant I spent hours reviewing statements and offering solutions for clients, but applying the same discipline to my own life had felt impossible until this trip. I thought back to the two clear occasions when I had extended loans to my brother Jacob for his business. The first time he needed $10,000 to launch his consulting firm, I transferred the amount from my savings right away, and he gave a quick promise to repay it soon. That promise never turned into action, and the subject simply disappeared from conversation. The second time came 2 years later when he asked for $15,000 to hire more staff and upgrade his office space. I approved the transfer once again, hoping it would help him build something stable. Jacob sent one short message of thanks but never followed up with any repayment schedule or update on how the funds were working. Those two moments stood out as examples of a pattern where my help was accepted as routine without any real acknowledgement or balance in return. A few hours after settling in, my phone showed a new text message. It was from my mother, Sandra Brooks. She asked how my current projects at work were going and added that the wedding preparations in Nashville were moving along steadily. The message stayed on everyday topics and never mentioned the earlier phone call or any possibility of my attendance. I read the words slowly and saw how carefully the main issue had been left out. I chose not to reply at that moment and muted the notifications for the family group chat so nothing would pull me back in. I put on my jacket and left the hotel to take a walk at Fisherman's Wharf. And the area was active with people moving through their day, and I joined the flow at my own pace. As I continued along the sidewalk, I examined the role I had played in the family for so long. My professional training taught me to set clear boundaries with money matters, yet I had struggled to apply that same principle at home. The miles between me and Nashville made the imbalance easier to see without the usual pressure. The walk stretched for the next hour as I followed the path without any hurry. I stopped at a couple of spots to sit and consider the cumulative weight of the support I had given over the years. My brother Jacob had moved forward with his plans, and my mother Sandra had drawn her lines in a way that left me outside certain events. This separation gave me room to weigh those facts without immediate reaction. I kept walking, letting the time pass without the urge to check my phone for updates. As the stroll continued, I reflected on how the habit of being the dependable one had formed. It had grown from repeated instances of stepping in when things got tight, but it had also drained my own reserves over time. The current setting let me pause that habit for the length of the trip. I felt no need to offer solutions or check in from afar. The choice to be here was already proving useful in shifting my perspective. I turned back toward the hotel as the afternoon light changed. The walk had helped organize my thoughts, and I looked forward to the rest of the stay without outside interruptions. I had no plan to reopen family messages for the remainder of the day. This interval belonged to me, and I intended to keep it that way. The next morning in San Francisco, I woke up to my phone lighting up with notifications. I picked up the device and unlocked the screen to find several new alerts. The most prominent were Instagram stories posted by my brother's fiancée, Amber Diaz. This was the first time I had seen her profile in any real detail. She had documented the wedding preparations back in Nashville with a series of videos and photos. One story highlighted the venue selection featuring crystal chandeliers and custom floral arrangements that looked expensive even from the images. Amber narrated how they had chosen the top-tier package to make the day unforgettable. Another clip showed brochures for their honeymoon destination in the Maldives, including overwater bungalows and private dining experiences on the beach. The captions emphasized that no expense was being spared for this milestone. I continued scrolling through the stories, taking in the details without commenting. My training as a financial advisor prompted me to estimate the cost based on similar events I had reviewed for clients. The venue alone appeared to be in the range of $25,000, and the honeymoon package she showcased could easily reach $18,000 more. The combined total raised questions in my mind about how the budget was being managed back home. A direct message from Jacob arrived shortly after. He wrote that the final details were falling into place and he was thrilled about marrying Amber. He attached a photo of himself trying on formal attire and added that the excitement was building every day. Wow. The message made no mention of the guest list or my exclusion from the event. He closed with a general well wish for my current activities, but nothing more personal. I read the text several times, noting how the communication stayed surface level as usual. Then my phone rang and the display showed my mother, Sandra, calling. I answered the call and her voice came through with a hint of strain she tried to mask with casual conversation. She inquired about my trip and whether I was managing to relax away from the office. She mentioned that things were busy in Nashville with the wedding preparations moving forward, but her tone carried an undercurrent of worry. She avoided bringing up the earlier decision about invitations and focused instead on general updates about Jacob's excitement and the vendors they had hired. I listened without interrupting and sensed that she was holding back from the real issues. As we talked, I started to piece together the possibility of financial pressure from the lavish displays Amber had shared. My experience with families who stretched their budgets for big events had taught me how quickly deposits could lead to problems if not planned carefully. I did not voice my suspicions during the call and kept my responses neutral and supportive of her need to talk. Sandra wrapped up the conversation by saying she would check in again soon without committing to any specific details about the wedding itself. I placed the phone on the table after the call ended and took a moment to process what I had seen and heard. The contrast between the extravagant posts and the careful avoidance of certain topics began to suggest that the plans might be exceeding what the family could comfortably afford. Yet I decided not to ask questions or offer assistance at this stage. The distance from Nashville was allowing me to see the pattern more clearly, and I chose to maintain my boundary for the duration of the stay. The rest of the morning involved me catching up on some professional reading and responding to a couple of client inquiries from my laptop. I reviewed market trends and prepared notes for upcoming meetings without letting the family updates interfere. The ability to focus on my own work reinforced the value of this solo trip. By the early afternoon, I had completed the tasks and stepped out for a quick break to clear my head. Later that day, additional notifications came in, but I left them unchecked for the time being. Jacob sent one more message sharing a short video of the rehearsal setup, but again without any invitation or acknowledgement. My mother, Sandra, followed up with a text about how the flowers had arrived and looked beautiful. Amber's stories continued to pop up with more details on the entertainment and catering choices. Each piece of communication highlighted the positive aspects while leaving the potential challenges unspoken. I spent the afternoon handling personal errands and reflecting on the ongoing dynamic. The habit of being the reliable support in the family had been present for years, but this time I was not engaging with it. The suspicion of underlying money issues lingered in the back of my mind, but I did not act on the impulse to reach out. The choice to stay detached was becoming more comfortable as the hours passed. As evening approached, I reviewed the day's events and felt a growing sense of clarity about my position. The family was moving forward with their plans in their own way, and I was carving out space for myself separate from that. I kept the phone on silent for the remainder of the night and focused on the quiet routine of the hotel room. This approach allowed me to enjoy the trip without the usual weight of expectations pulling me back. The afternoon in San Francisco brought an unexpected call from my father. I was reviewing some client documents on my laptop when the phone rang and displayed my father, Joseph Brooks, on the screen. I answered, and his voice came through with a noticeable tension he tried to keep steady. He started by asking how the weather was on the West Coast and whether I had managed to visit any local attractions during my stay. After the initial small talk, he shifted to the real reason for the calls. He explained that the wedding plans in Nashville had encountered some financial hurdles related to the honeymoon arrangements Amber had selected. The overwater bungalows and private excursions she wanted added significant costs that had not been fully budgeted in advance. Joseph described how Amber had insisted on the premium package to create lasting memories, and Jacob had agreed without checking the total impact on their savings. He mentioned that a portion of the honeymoon deposit was now due, and the family account was coming up short by several $1,000s. My father did not provide an exact figure right away, but his tone made it clear the amount was substantial enough to cause immediate concern. He spoke carefully about the situation as if testing my reaction before going further. I listened without interrupting and asked a few clarifying questions about the timeline for the payments and what steps they had already taken. Joseph admitted that they had already used most of their available funds for the venue and catering deposits. He then mentioned that Amber had also upgraded the entertainment package at the last minute, which pushed the numbers higher. The combination of these choices had created a shortfall that needed to be addressed quickly to avoid losing the reservations. As the conversation continued, my father Joseph finally stated the amount they were short. It was $28,000 that needed to be covered within the next few days to secure the honeymoon and prevent any cancellation fees. He explained that they had explored options with their bank, but the approval process would take too long and they did not want to risk defaulting on the contracts. His voice grew quieter as he described the stress this was causing everyone involved. I remained calm and did not offer any immediate solution. Instead, I pointed out that such large, unplanned expenses often led to complications and suggested they review the contracts carefully for any clauses about refunds or adjustments. Joseph acknowledged the advice, but then directly asked if I could help bridge the gap with a short-term loan from my side. He assured me that Jacob would repay it as soon as possible once the business picked up after the wedding. The request hung in the air, and I took a moment before responding. My years of experience as a financial advisor had shown me how family loans frequently complicated relationships when repayment timelines slipped. I told my father that I needed time to consider the details and would get back to him after reviewing my own commitments. Joseph thanked me for listening and ended the call by saying he hoped I was enjoying my time away despite the news from home. I set the phone down and walked to the window overlooking the bay. The call had confirmed my earlier suspicions about the budget being stretched too thin. The lavish posts from Amber and the careful messages from the family now made more sense in light of the shortfall. Yet I chose not to act on the request right away. The distance allowed me to evaluate the situation objectively without the usual pressure of being the immediate fixer. The rest of the afternoon involved me handling routine work tasks and preparing notes for upcoming client meetings. I reviewed several investment portfolios and responded to emails without letting the family matter dominate my thoughts. This ability to compartmentalize reinforced the benefit of creating physical separation from Nashville. Later that evening, Joseph sent a follow-up text reminding me of the timeline and expressing his appreciation for any consideration I could give. The message was polite but carried an underlying urgency. I read it once and left it unanswered for the time being. My focus remained on maintaining the boundary I had set for this trip. As night fell, I reflected on the conversation with my father. The pattern of expecting me to step in during financial tight spots had repeated itself many times over the years. This instance felt different because I was not in the same city and could weigh the consequences more clearly. I decided to sleep on the decision and address it with fresh perspective in the morning. The call from Joseph had introduced a new layer to the events unfolding back home, but I kept my response measured. The trip continued on its own terms, and I intended to honor the commitment I had made to myself by not rushing into any financial involvement at this stage. 2 days before the wedding, my brother reached out with greater desperation. I had stepped out for a light breakfast near the hotel when Jacob called again. His voice lacked the usual confidence and carried clear panic as he described the escalating situation in Nashville. The event planner had issued a final notice requiring an immediate additional payment of $35,000 to cover last-minute contract adjustments and upgraded services that Amber had requested. The venue staff had also threatened to withhold access if the remaining balance was not settled by the end of the business day. Jacob explained that Amber had wanted an extended reception with premium catering options and a professional photographer package that exceeded the original agreement. These changes had accumulated into a shortfall that neither he nor the family could cover on short notice. He admitted they had exhausted their savings on the initial deposits and now faced the real possibility of losing everything already paid if the extra amount was not transferred right away. His words came quickly as he outlined the timeline and the growing pressure from the vendors. During the call, I heard Amber in the background urging him to convince me to help, but Jacob then put the conversation on speaker so she could speak directly. Amber explained how important this celebration was for their future and how heartbroken she would be if any part of the day had to be compromised. She appealed to my experience with money matters and asked if I could wire the funds as soon as possible to keep the plans intact. Her tone mixed politeness with clear expectation based on past family support. I listened carefully to both of them and asked targeted questions about the exact contract clauses and whether they had explored other financing options through their bank. Jacob provided some details, but they remained incomplete, which triggered my professional caution. I reminded them that committing large sums without full documentation often led to longer-term problems. Neither responded with concrete answers and instead circled back to the immediate need for the $35,000. And after the call ended, I received a separate text from Amber. She wrote that she viewed me as the most capable person in the family to resolve this and hoped I would not let them down at such a critical moment. The message included a photo of the decorated venue space and a note about how much the perfect day meant to her and Jacob. I read the text and noted the direct appeal to my role as the dependable one. I took time to process the combined requests without rushing into any commitment. The pattern was familiar, yet this instance felt more intense because of the tight deadline and the involvement of Amber as a new voice in the dynamic. My years of quietly covering shortfalls had created an expectation that I would always step in. Yet the current separation allowed me to see the one-sided nature of that arrangement more clearly. I replied to Jacob with a measured message stating that I needed to review my current financial obligations before considering any assistance. To Amber, I sent a short acknowledgement indicating that I understood the stress of the situation and would think carefully about the request. Neither reply contained any promise or timeline for action. I then turned my attention to other matters for the rest of the morning, including a scheduled virtual meeting with a client. The afternoon passed with me handling routine professional tasks and maintaining my established routine in San Francisco. I reviewed several reports and responded to work emails while keeping the family situation at a distance. This ability to focus elsewhere highlighted the benefit of the physical separation I had created. Later that day, Jacob sent another message updating the urgency as the planner continued to press for payment. Amber followed with a text expressing her disappointment at the lack of an immediate positive response. I reviewed both but chose not to engage further at that point. The requests had made the underlying expectations within the family even more apparent, but I held to my decision to evaluate everything objectively. As the evening approached, I considered the cumulative effect of these appeals. The combination of my brother's direct call and Amber's personal messages had brought the financial pressure into sharper focus. Yet I remained firm in not committing any resources without full consideration of the long-term implications. The trip continued to serve its purpose by providing the space needed to break from the familiar cycle of automatic support. The wedding day arrived with chaos unfolding back in Nashville. Word spread quickly through messages that the entire ceremony had been canceled at the last minute. The venue management refused to proceed without the outstanding $35,000 payment being settled in full. Vendors began contacting the family directly, demanding immediate resolution or threatening to retain all prior deposits. The group chat exploded with updates as relatives and friends who had already arrived in town started asking what was happening. My mother, Sandra, called multiple times in succession. When I finally answered, she was barely holding back tears as she described the scene at the venue. Guests were being turned away at the entrance, and the coordinator had announced the cancellation publicly. Sandra explained that the planner had locked the remaining funds and would not release any portion until the full balance was cleared. She detailed how Jacob and Amber had tried negotiating on site, but the contract terms left no room for flexibility. Joseph followed with his own call shortly after. His voice sounded exhausted as he confirmed that the honeymoon reservations had also been forfeited due to the missed final payments. The overwater bungalow package and associated experiences were now lost, along with a significant non-refundable deposit. He mentioned that several family members who had traveled for the event were now stuck with hotel costs and no celebration to attend. The embarrassment was spreading through their social circle in Nashville. Jacob sent a series of voice messages describing the immediate fallout. Amber had confronted the venue staff in front of arriving guests, leading to an uncomfortable confrontation. Some friends had already posted questions on social media about the sudden change of plans, which only amplified the situation. Jacob admitted that the combination of the upgraded reception elements and the honeymoon extras had created a shortfall they could no longer bridge without external help. Throughout the day, the messages kept coming at an increasing pace. Sandra sent updates about guests leaving disappointed and vendors issuing formal cancellation notices. Joseph forwarded copies of emails from the bank showing that their loan application would take weeks to process. Amber sent a direct message expressing her shock at how quickly everything had collapsed and reiterating her earlier appeal for assistance. I remained in San Francisco monitoring the stream of notifications without responding. Each update painted a clearer picture of how the extravagant choices had snowballed into a complete collapse of the event. The distance allowed me to observe the consequences without being pulled into the immediate emotional whirlwind. I noted the specific amounts mentioned and the contract details that made recovery difficult in such a short time frame. By late afternoon, the group chat had grown silent for a period before new messages resumed with questions about next steps. Sandra called again, asking if I had considered the earlier requests and whether I could still intervene to salvage at least part of the day. I listened to her account of the current state but maintained my position of needing more time to evaluate. Joseph followed up with a text listing the total losses so far, including the venue deposit and honeymoon payments. The cancellation became official when the venue posted a notice about the event being scrubbed from their schedule. Word traveled through the Nashville community, and some mutual acquaintances began reaching out to the family for explanations. Jacob sent one final voice message that day describing how Amber had left the venue in distress and how the family was now facing awkward conversations with everyone who had made travel arrangements. I spent the remainder of the day handling my own schedule in San Francisco while the events continued to unfold remotely. The pattern of last-minute expectations had reached its peak with the public nature of the cancellation adding new pressure. Yet I chose not to engage with any of the appeals at that moment. The physical separation continued to provide the clarity needed to assess the full scope of the situation. As evening settled, the frequency of messages decreased, but the underlying tension remained evident in every update. The wedding day that had been planned with such high expectations had ended without a single ceremony taking place. The family was left to manage the immediate practical consequences, including guest accommodations and vendor disputes, while I observed from afar. 1 week after the cancellation, I returned to Nashville but kept my distance. I booked a room at a hotel on the outskirts of the city instead of heading straight home. The decision gave me space to observe developments without immediate involvement. Messages continued arriving from the family group, but I limited my responses to brief acknowledgments when necessary. Jacob had lost his consulting position the day after the wedding fallout became public knowledge. His employer cited the negative attention from the canceled event and concerns about financial reliability as reasons for the termination. He spent the following days contacting other firms but received little interest once word of the debt situation spread through professional networks in Nashville. Amber Diaz posted several updates expressing her frustration with how the plans had unraveled. She mentioned postponing their future together indefinitely and shared her disappointment over the lost honeymoon and public embarrassment. Her messages to me became less frequent but carried a sharper tone when they did arrive, asking why I had not stepped in to prevent the collapse. Sandra called from home describing the difficult conversations they were having with extended relatives who had traveled for the event. Some family members had expressed concern about the financial mismanagement, while others offered sympathy that quickly turned into questions about repayment of their own travel costs. She mentioned that Joseph was spending long hours reviewing documents and speaking with creditors about possible arrangements. I met Joseph briefly at a neutral location near my hotel. He looked tired as he outlined the total financial impact, including the lost venue deposit and honeymoon payments. The family had started the process of applying for a personal loan through their bank, but the interest rates were higher than expected due to their current credit situation. He asked again if I could provide any support to ease the immediate burden, but I explained that I needed to prioritize my own stability at this stage. During my stay in the hotel, I reviewed my professional schedule and handled several client calls without disruption. The routine helped maintain perspective on the family events. Jacob sent a longer message detailing his job search struggles and the strain the situation had placed on his relationship with Amber. He noted that she had moved temporarily to stay with a friend while they sorted through their options. Sandra followed up with updates about community reactions in their Nashville neighborhood. Mutual acquaintances had begun asking about the canceled wedding at local gatherings, which added to the ongoing discomfort. She described how the family was now focusing on damage control and trying to address the vendor disputes one by one. I continued my stay at the hotel for several more days, focusing on work tasks and personal errands. The physical separation allowed me to see the consequences play out without being drawn back into the role of primary supporter. Each update highlighted different aspects of the fallout, including job loss, relationship tension, and mounting interest on potential loans. Amber sent one final direct message during this period expressing her view that the family had relied too heavily on certain members, and that the current difficulties could have been avoided with earlier intervention. I read the message carefully but chose not to reply with any commitment. As the week progressed, the volume of urgent messages decreased as the family shifted toward longer-term solutions. Joseph mentioned progress on the bank loan application while noting the monthly payments would stretch their budget significantly. Jacob continued his job search with limited success, and the tension between him and Amber remained unresolved. I finalized my hotel arrangements and prepared to resume my normal routine in Nashville on my own terms. The events of the past weeks had made the boundaries within the family clearer than ever before. I maintained my limited contact and focused on rebuilding my own schedule without the weight of constant family crises. The return to the city marked a new phase where I observed the ongoing adjustments from a deliberate distance. The family continued dealing with the practical and emotional repercussions, while I prioritized my professional responsibilities and personal well-being. A month after the canceled wedding, I made my position clear once and for all. The first Sunday dinner invitation arrived by text from Sandra. She mentioned that the family wanted to gather as usual and hoped I could join them at the house. I read the message carefully and replied that I would not be attending. The response was short and direct, without offering any explanation or future plans. That single decision marked the beginning of a complete break from the previous pattern of automatic participation. Joseph called later that evening to discuss the bank loan they had finally secured. The interest rate sat at nearly 18% because of their recent financial history, and the monthly payments would consume a large portion of their income for the next several years. He described how Jacob was still searching for stable employment while dealing with the damage to his professional reputation in Nashville. Amber had moved out permanently and made it clear that she needed time apart to reconsider their future together. Sandra followed up with additional messages about the ongoing conversations within their social circle. Several neighbors and acquaintances continued to ask about the sudden cancellation, which kept the embarrassment alive in the community. The family had begun selling some personal items to help cover the higher loan payments, but the strain showed in every update she shared. I continued my regular work schedule as a financial advisor and focused on building stronger boundaries in my own life. Client meetings filled my days, and I dedicated evenings to personal projects that had been set aside for years. The absence of constant family emergencies created space I had not experienced before. I reviewed my own finances and made adjustments to protect my stability moving forward. Jacob sent one final lengthy message outlining his current situation. He had taken a lower-paying position in a different field and was working to rebuild his credit after the debt fallout. He acknowledged the pattern of relying on me for support, but stopped short of any deeper reflection. I read the message and chose not to reply. The cycle of expectation had ended with my consistent silence. Over the following weeks, the contact from the family gradually decreased. Sandra still sent occasional texts about everyday matters, but I responded only when necessary and never committed to visits or financial discussions. Joseph mentioned that the loan payments were creating tension at home and that they were exploring additional side work to manage the burden. The reality of living with the consequences of unchecked spending had settled in fully. I attended professional networking events and strengthened relationships outside the family circle. The experience taught me the importance of applying the same standards to personal matters that I used with clients. Clear boundaries and objective decision making protected my resources and mental energy in ways that endless accommodation never had. The family continued facing practical challenges, including higher monthly expenses and lingering social questions about the canceled event. Jacob's job situation remained unstable, and the relationship with Amber showed no signs of reconciliation. Sandra and Joseph managed the loan obligations while adjusting to a more limited lifestyle than they had planned. I maintained my distance without anger or confrontation. The decision to step away completely allowed me to focus on my own growth and priorities. Looking back, I recognized how the role of constant supporter had limited my own opportunities for years. By choosing not to rescue the situation, I had finally broken a pattern that no longer served anyone involved. This separation brought a lasting change. The family learned to navigate their challenges without expecting immediate intervention from me, and I gained the freedom to direct my energy toward a more balanced life. The experience reinforced a simple truth: protecting your own stability is not selfish when others have repeatedly taken advantage of your willingness to help. True family respect requires mutual accountability rather than one-sided sacrifice. From that point forward, I committed to living by that principle without exception.